and welcome to a brand new Pokemon TCG video. Today guys, I am going to be doing a set review for the Bandit Ring / Ancient Origins set, which is due to come out by August 12th, I believe. I was actually waiting to get the cards in their English versions, but unfortunately it seems like PokeBeach hasn't released them just yet. There are still these English translations, so I'm just gonna go with those and do a basic set review for you guys. Anyways, I'm gonna be skipping over a lot of cards. I'm mainly gonna be focusing on the cards which I personally feel have a lot of competitive potential and that are going to be good in the competitive format, so please do keep that in mind. I'm going to be straying away from discussing certain cards again. So I may actually skip over a few cards which you guys personally feel like have some competitive potential. So I do want to apologize for that beforehand in case that is what I do. I also want to say that this video is probably going to be relatively lengthy, and if that is the case, I may just split it up into a part 1 and part 2, depending on how tired I get just from discussing the cards. So with that, we're going to go right ahead and dig into the cards, which I personally feel have a lot going on for them. So we're going to be discussing right away the Vileplume that is coming from the Bandit Ring set. So it has the Frustrating Pollen ability, and what this means is that as long as our Vileplume happens to be a Pokemon that we have either in our bench or even as our active Pokemon, both ourselves and our opponent are unable to play any item cards from their hand whatsoever. So that is pretty powerful. It's a little bit unusual though, because it forces it nullifies us from being able to make use of any of our own item cards, so that can be a little bit tricky to try and work around. I mean, Seismitoad EX, Trevenant, those types of Pokemon have traditionally been focusing on item locking our opponents, whereas the Vileplume does that to both ourselves and the opponent. But the Vileplume does have the advantage in that it can remain in our bench and its ability will still be taking place. So Vileplume is a pretty powerful Pokemon, I would say. Definitely one that we're going to be seeing a whole lot of. It is a Stage 2 Pokemon, so that is something we should keep in mind. It will need a rare candy, or at least some Evo Sodas, or lots and lots of evolutions for any players to really be able to make use of it. So I'm not really sure how that's going to work out. I feel like it may be getting a little bit overhyped. Personally, I'm not really sure how good of a Pokemon this is going to be, but I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot of players trying to make the most out of it. So that is the first Pokemon that we're going to be discussing. Not really going to be discussing its previous evolutions. I mean, there's nothing really outstanding about them. The only outstanding quality that they have is that they'll ultimately evolve into a Vileplume, if that's any sort of consolation. So with that, let's go and scroll down a little bit and discuss the next Pokemon that I think has a lot of competitive potential. We are going to be seeing a whole lot of the Ariados. It does evolve from the Spinarak. Again, Spinarak is not an outstanding Pokemon by any means. It has the Poison Nest ability, and this Pokemon just has a lot of synergy with the Sceptile EX, which I will be discussing in just a few seconds. So the Poison Nest ability allows us to poison both the active Pokemon and, well, both our own active Pokemon and the opponent's active Pokemon. Its attack isn't really that great. We're probably not going to be making use of the corner attack a whole lot, but Poison Nest works really well, especially if we run a grass type deck, because that means that our own Pokemon are not going to be poisoned, and of course if the opponent is not running grass type Pokemon, then we will be poisoning it. And now why that works so well with the Sceptile EX is because Sceptile EX has 2 attacks, but it's really the second one that I think is the impressive one. It has the Assassin Claw attack, and if our opponent's active Pokemon is affected by a special condition, again, just remember the Spinarak special ability, this attack will hit for a massive 60 damage plus an additional 70 damage, so that's 130 damage for only 2 energy attachments. That is powerful. I mean, just think about cards such as Muscle Band that easily bumps up the total damage output to 150, again, just for a mere 2 energy attachment. So that is very, very powerful. It also has the Sleep Poison attack, which could potentially put our opponent's active Pokemon in a sleep and poisoned state, but it's not really that great of an attack. You would much rather pair it up with the Ariados. I have to say that the Sceptile EX to me is a bit of an outstanding Pokemon because generally speaking, a lot of Pokemon that have Mega Evolutions don't tend to be the greatest. I mean, for example, we don't see a whole lot of Gardevoir EX by itself. We don't see a whole lot of Aggron EX by itself. We don't see a whole lot of Groudon EX by itself just because, generally speaking, their Mega Evolutions tend to be the more impressive of the two. But Sceptile EX has a very impressive attack and an even more impressive Mega Evolution. So we have the Mega Sceptile EX standing at a bulky 220 HP. That's not bad by any means, and again, it is a very energetically efficient Pokemon. So it is a Mega Evolution Pokemon, so of course what that means is that whenever we do evolve the Sceptile EX into the Mega Sceptile EX, our turn is going to come to an abrupt end. However, there should be some Spirit Links for pretty much all of the Mega Evolution Pokemon that we have in the set, so that is quite nice. So ideally, we're not really going to be giving up a whole lot of our turns whenever we do evolve Sceptile EX into the Mega Sceptile EX. Now, it also has the Delta Stop ability, which prevents, Delta Stop or Sigma Stop? I'm not actually sure how this little symbol is pronounced, so again, I'm really sorry. I know some people are probably going to call me out on it in the comment section down below, but that's okay. Anyways, so what this does is that it prevents all effects of our opponent's Pokemon's abilities done to this Pokemon. So that means that, for example, if we have the opponent who happens to have a Munna on their bench, for example, and then they use their Pokemon's ability, well, our Mega Sceptile EX is absolutely immune to that. So it can be a pretty nice ability. I mean, just there's a lot of Pokemon that will try and force some sort of condition on us. So for example, there's certain Pokemon that when they attack us, they force us to flip a coin, and if we flip 8 tails, for example, we're not able to attack. Delta Stop absolutely prevents those types of abilities, so that's a pretty cool ability. And it also has the Jagged Saber attack, which hits for 100 damage. Not all that impressive since it is a Mega Evolution Pokemon. However, by attacking with the Jagged Saber attack, we are able to attach up to 2 Grass Energy cards from our hand to our benched Pokemon in any way we like. If that wasn't impressive on its own, by doing so, we also can remove all damage counters from each Pokemon we attach the energy cards to in this specific manner. So that is very, very powerful. I mean, we're probably going to be seeing a whole lot of Mega Sceptile EX. I feel like it's a Pokemon that has a lot of potential. I think we're definitely going to be seeing it in competitive play as well. So Mega Sceptile EX, a very impressive Mega EX Pokemon from this set. Now, scrolling down just a little bit, we have another very impressive grass Pokemon. Now, there are 2 different types of Vespiquens. Personally, I don't think this one is all that impressive. I think the really impressive Vespiquen happens to be the one that has the Bee Revenge attack. Now, you guys are probably quite familiar with the Flareon from the Plasma Freeze set that we saw performing quite well just because of all of those battle compressors and things like that can really force a lot of the Pokemon in our deck into that discard pile, and simultaneously it makes the Flareon more and more powerful. Now, Vespiquen is probably an even more powerful Pokemon. The reason being is due to its typing. I mean, Grass type is very, 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 very powerful at the moment. I mean, we saw a lot of the top decks making it to the finals, such as the Seismitoad EX, the Primal Kyogre EX decks, the Primal Groudon EX decks, the Wailord EX decks. All of them happen to be extremely susceptible to grass type Pokemon, and Vespiquen is a grass type Pokemon. All we would essentially need is more or less 10 Pokemon into our discard pile, and then that Vespiquen could very easily knock out the bulk of those Pokemon in a single attack. So I think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of Vespiquen in the near future. Also, its first attack, the Information Control attack, also allows us to draw cards from our deck until we have up to 6 cards in our hand. So that is a pretty solid attack. I mean, the one thing where it's lacking as opposed to the Flareon, I would say, is the fact that it has 10 HP less. I mean, Flareon did have, or actually does it? I believe so. I'm pretty sure the Flareon has 100 HP. Sorry if I'm getting my information wrong, but I'm 99% sure that the Flareon had 100 HP. So that's really the one area where the Vespiquen is lacking, but it definitely makes up for it in the fact that it has absolutely no retreat cost, so we can easily retreat it and bring out one of our bench Pokemon. So Vespiquen is an all-around very, very solid Pokemon. Now, moving on to the Virizion, another Pokemon that I think is pretty impressive. It has 2 different attacks. One of them is the Rescue attack, which allows us to search search our discard pile for 2 Pokemon, show them to our opponent, and then put them into our hand. Not exactly the greatest attack. Can be useful though, in case we have, say, a Jirachi EX or a Shaman EX in our discard pile, something like that. So it can be useful, but we're probably not going to be making much use of it for the most part. What we're instead going to be focusing on is using the prize counter attack. So with this attack, again, it only requires 2 grass energy cards, and it hits for an initial 40 damage. However, if we have more prize cards remaining than our opponent, this attack hits for 80 more damage. That is incredibly powerful. I mean, it's a non-EX Pokemon, stands at a relatively bulky 110 HP, and can potentially hit for 120 damage for a mere 2 energy card attachments. Yes, that is a very impressive card. I feel like the grass Pokemon that we're seeing coming in with the new set are really going to be quite competitive for the most part, and I think they're trying to fill that gap or void that's really being left behind by the Verziniax Genesect EX leaving the standard format, which were by far some of the most dominant grass type Pokemon that we tended to see at play. Now we have some interesting evolutions as well, which I'm definitely going to be discussing. So the Flareon has the Flare Effect ability. It can be very powerful, especially if what we're trying to do is just target multiple weaknesses, because there's several different types of these evolutions, and they're all able to change the typing of our Pokemon. So as long as this Pokemon is in play, all of our stage 1 Pokemon are fire type as well as their original type. I'm pretty sure the R here stands for fire type. I mean, it would absolutely make sense because we see fire energy and then we see an R and a CC. CCs are definitely colorless. So anyways, this can increase the typing of our Pokemon, and I actually saw an interesting little conversation in the Pokemon trading card game subreddit where they were discussing how the Noivern could be used quite effectively with all of these different evolutions, with the wide lens as well. So that is kind of cool. So these Pokemon will increase our typing, but keep in mind that it only affects our stage 1 Pokemon. So that is a bit of a downside to it, but aside from that, these Pokemon, I can definitely see a bit of usage in them. Not really sure how competitive they're going to be, but I'm sure people are going to come up with creative ways to make use of these cards. Now moving on a little bit further, we have the Entei, which is a half art card. Personally, I don't really think it's all that great of a Pokemon. However, it does have a unique ability. Again, I believe it's pronounced Delta Double. No, actually, Delta doesn't sound right. Sigma Double. Anyways, I don't know. I'm really sorry. I don't actually know how to pronounce this first little symbol. But it can have up to 2 Pokemon Tool cards attached to it. So that's pretty powerful. So for example, we can latch on 2 Muscle Bands to it. And then its Heat Tackle attack can hit for a massive 170 damage, which is pretty impressive, but it is quite energetically expensive. So I don't think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of the Entei. Its Flame Barrier attack isn't the greatest as well. But I mean, if we do attach 2 Silver Bangles to it, that can be 90 damage with a mere 2 energy attachments, and it simultaneously lowers all damage done to this Pokemon by our opponent's next attacks by 30. So it can be good, but personally, I don't really see a lot of players making use of the Entei, but you never know, so it is worth just discussing him. We also have the, no, Volcarina wasn't all that impressive of a Pokemon. Again, we have this Volcarina as well, which has the Delta Stop. I'm gonna call it Sigma Stop. I'm sorry guys, but anyways, it prevents any effects of our opponent's Pokemon's abilities done to this Pokemon. Again, same one as the Mega Sceptile EX that we saw. Unfortunately, it tends to fall a little bit short with respects to its attacks. Its attacks aren't really all that impressive for the most part. I mean, it is an evolution Pokemon, so it does take us a little bit of time to get it set up. It has the Burning Scale attack, which can potentially hit for up to 60 damage, hits for an initial 20 damage plus 2 flip coins, and if we manage to get both of them as heads, then we can hit for 40 more damage. So it's not all that great of an attack. The Veil Wind isn't a very good attack either. I mean, it's hit for 80 damage, and then the opponent is forced to switch their defending Pokemon with one of his or her bench Pokemon. So not really a great Pokemon, but still felt like it was worth discussing. Never know what types of strategies people may come up with it. We have the Gyarados, which has the Theta Double. Okay, so it looks like that little symbol is pronounced as Theta, so my apologies. I wasn't really sure. This Gyarados is actually kind of unique in that the counter attack can potentially hit for a massive amount of damage. So counter attack can hit for 30 damage times the number of damage counters on all of our benched Magikarp. So it can potentially hit for Well, I mean, this is saying 30 damage times the number of damage counters, but this one is saying 30 plus, so I'm not really sure if it's up to 150 damage if we have a total of 4 copies of Magikarp. I'm thinking that is probably the case, unless there's been some sort of mistranslation, or maybe the Japanese cards don't happen to have a multiplication side beside them, so I'm not entirely sure. But let's pretend that it's capped at 120 damage for double colorless energy if we have a total of 4 Magikarps, which we purposely stack some damage counters on. So that can be a bit of a unique attack, but not exactly the greatest. And then we also have the Thrash attack, which hits for 100 damage, and if we flip a coin, if heads, this attack does 30 more damage. If tails, this Pokemon does 30 damage to itself. Not a good attack by any means. Very energetically expensive and caps at 130 damage. So again, I'm not really impressed by its second attack, but with the Theta Double ability, we are able to attach up to 2 Pokemon Tool cards on this Gyarados, so that could potentially mean that for a double colors energy and for ourselves trying to cripple our own Magikarp to a certain extent, and 2 Silver Bangles, for example, we could hit for up to 180 damage, provided of course that our Gyarados has 2 Silver Bangles latched onto it. So there could be a bit of potential here, but I think the vast majority of players are going to stray away from using this Gyarados for the most part. We also see the Vaporeon. Again, it has the Aqua Effect ability, so this is quite similar to that of the Flareon's ability, which allows each of our Stage 1 Pokemon to be Water type as well as their original type. Its attack is really weak, so I'm not really going to discuss it, but yeah, that's all there really is word with respects to discussing the Vaporeon in the new set that we are going to see. Now, Regice is actually a bit of a cool Pokemon. It has the Resistance Blizzard attack, which hits for 70 damage. Doesn't seem like it's all that impressive, but I mean, for the most part, it's not. However, during our next opponent's turn, we are able to prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by our opponent's EX Pokemon. So that is actually quite impressive. I mean, you guys saw the what's it called, the Hippowdon, how well it did with respects to the US Nationals. Actually earned a pretty high spot in there because it performed really well. But also, given the fact that Hippowdon is a Stage 1 Pokemon, just keep in mind that Regice we could bring out right away. Now, Hippowdon did have the advantage in that we could attach those what's it called, those fighting energies to it and things like that, but I feel like we can see a bit of competitive potential with the Regice as well. It also has the Ice Beam attack, only hits for 30 damage, could potentially paralyze our opponent's active Pokemon, but not exactly the greatest attack. So moving on to our next Pokemon, which is going to be the Kyurem EX. Kyurem EX has 2 attacks. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be all that great of an EX Pokemon for the most part. I mean, it does have 180 HP, and I think that's pretty much its only redeeming quality. Frozen World hits for 30 damage to each of our opponent's Pokemon. Not exactly all that great, especially given the fact that it is a little bit energetically expensive. I mean, maybe if it was a Water Energy card and a double colorless energy, I could see it as being a bit of a feasible attack, but personally, I would probably prefer to use the Noivern as opposed to the Kyurem EX instead. I mean, Noivern only costs us a single prize card if we lose it, and it has the very solid echolocation ability, so I'm not impressed by the first attack by any means whatsoever. And then we also have the Ice Caliber attack, which hits for 130 damage, simultaneously allows us to discard an energy card attached to this Pokemon. And so first of all, it forces us to discard an energy card, but during our next turn, the opponent's defending Pokemon is unable to attack, which can easily be resolved by them simply switching out their active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. So again, I'm really not impressed by the Kyurem EX. I feel like this is going to be the next Thunderous EX of this set. I mean, I'm of course referring to the Thunderous EX from the Roaring Sky set, which almost never sees any play because it's just not that great of a Pokemon. So moving on, guys, we have the Jolteon, which has the Electric Effect ability. Not really sure why there's 4 Jolteons here. I mean, if one wasn't enough for us to get a basic understanding, they needed to include 4. Anyways, again, the Electric Effect is very similar to both the Flareon and the Vaporeon special abilities, allowing each of our Stage 1 Pokemon to be Lightning type as well as their original type. So that's kind of cool. Its Thunder Blast attack isn't exactly the greatest. So moving on to the next Pokemon in our list. list. So the Ampharos EX and the Mega Ampharos EX. Now Ampharos EX, not exactly the best Pokemon for the most part. I mean, it has the Thunder Rod attack, which if we're somehow able to manipulate the top cards of our deck, it can definitely be useful with respects to setting up the rate at which we can ultimately set up our Thundurus EX, and then hopefully our Mega Ampharos EX. My apologies, but yeah, Thunder Rod is probably not the best attack, but it can be useful, don't get me wrong. In certain situations can absolutely help us attack a lot earlier. And then the Ampharos EX also has the Sparking Tail attack, which hits for 100 damage, and the really nice thing about it is that this attack's damage isn't affected by weakness, resistance, or any other effects on the defending Pokemon, so it can be very effective to go through Pokemon special abilities such as the Suicune, and the Sigilif with the Safeguard ability, we can also use it to target Pokemon such as the Pyro. So yeah, so it's actually a pretty solid attack for the most part, but again, it's just incredibly energetically expensive, so I don't really think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of Ampharos EX, especially when we have its evolution, the Mega Ampharos EX. Now this is a pretty cool Pokemon for the most part. Again, keep in mind that it is a Mega Evolution Pokemon, so whenever we do bring it out, it is going to force our turn to come to an abrupt end, unless of course we have a Spirit Link latched onto that Ampharos EX before we evolve it into the Mega Ampharos EX. It has the Exavolt attack, which has for 120 damage, but we can take advantage of this attack. We can inflict an additional 50 damage to the opponent's active Pokemon, and by doing so we paralyze our opponent's active Pokemon. So that's kind of cool. The downside to it is that by doing this, we inflict 30 damage upon our own Mega Ampharos EX. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but I definitely can see a lot of players taking advantage of the paralysis. I mean, paralysis is there's no coin flip requirement. As soon as we paralyze the opponent's active Pokemon, that's it. They're unable to do anything whatsoever during the next turn, unless the opponent somehow has a switch or something like that to be able to retreat that active Pokemon. But if they can't, then that Pokemon is pretty much unable to do anything, while the Mega Ampharos EX can unleash its wrath on it again during the next turn. So moving on, we have the Unknown. I feel like this is a Pokemon worth discussing just because I feel like it's pretty terrible. For the most part, I mean, it has the Last Will ability, so once during our turn, if this Pokemon happens to be on our bench, we may discard this Pokemon and all cards attached to it. At the very least, it doesn't count as a knocked out Pokemon, but by doing so, we're able to draw onto a card. I mean, there's not a whole lot of decks that I can personally think of that would really be able to take advantage of this Pokemon special ability. I mean, maybe I can see decks that... I mean, there's not a whole lot that I can really see with respects to the Unknown. Feels to me like it's just a bit of an unnecessary liability. I mean, if this card forces us to draw onto an additional card, if that's really what we want to use it for, then why wouldn't we just include something better, that like such an Acrobike, for example, or just another card that will actually be useful. So again, I don't really see a whole lot of use of this card, but I'm sure some players will come up with creative ways of taking advantage of this Pokemon special ability. Unfortunately, I just don't see it, so I don't think that this is going to be all that great of a Pokemon. So moving on, guys, we have some other very cool Pokemon. Let's see, I want to go and discuss the Golurk. So it has the Theta Stop ability, preventing all effects of our opponent's Pokemon's abilities done to this Pokemon. Again, that can be a bit of a cool attack. It also has the Double type ability, so this Pokemon happens to be both fighting type, I believe, and psychic type, so that's kind of cool. We can take advantage of different types of weaknesses going on over here. Golurk is also a relatively bulky 130 HP Pokemon, a stage 1 Pokemon at that, so that is kind of impressive. And then it has the superpower attack, requires a total of 4 colorless energy cards. I do like the fact that it only happens to be colorless energies, so we can ideally get it set up in 2 turns, and it can potentially hit for quite a bit of damage, so it can hit for 80 damage, and we can also make this attack hit for an additional 40 damage, so that's not bad. I mean, its attack does cap at 120 HP. Could potentially see a little bit of this Pokemon in use, but again, it's not the greatest Pokemon. However, its Theta Stop ability is quite nice for the most part. Definitely can't see that coming into use. Now, the Hoopa EX has, ironically, the Bandit Ring ability, which is what the set was going to be called in Japan. For the American version, I believe it is called the Ancient Origins. So anyways, the Bandit Ring ability, what it does is that whenever we lay down the Hoopa EX from our hand onto our bench, we are able to make use of this ability. So, and this ability allows us to search for up to 3 Pokemon EX, excluding Hoopa EX, and then we have to show them to our opponent and then put them into our hand. So that is a very impressive ability. I mean, we can use this Hoopa EX as a draw supported Pokemon if we pair it up with the Shaman EX, for example. We can also use it in combination with Mega EX Pokemon. For example, we can look for a Sceptile EX and a Mega Sceptile EX. So Hoopa EX is just very impressive Pokemon for the most part. It is restricted only to EX Pokemon, so that is something to keep in mind. We can't use it to look for, say, a Mr. Mime, for example, or anything like that. But still, 3 EX Pokemon, I mean, this is a built-in Ultra Ball, so I think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of the Hoopa EX. Its attack, unfortunately, isn't the greatest. It does require 3 Psychic Energy cards, so that can be a little bit tricky for us to really get it going. And whenever we use this attack, we're forced to discard 2 energy cards attached to this Pokemon, and we're only able to hit for 100 damage to any of our opponent's Pokemon, so that includes their bench Pokemon as well. So it can be good, but I don't really honestly think we're going to be using it for its attack. I just think that its special ability is what really makes the Hoopa EX a outstanding Pokemon, and also the fact that it is a very bulky 170 HP Pokemon. 170 HP Pokemon. Traditionally, when we see tech Pokemon such as these, they tend to have a little bit lower HP, so Celebi EX, Jirachi EX, Shaman EX, for example, tend to have a lot less HP. Hoopa EX is quite bulky, so it's not all that big of a liability, even if we are just using it for its special ability. I mean, the only liability I would really say it has is the fact that it requires 2 energy cards to be able to retreat, so that is just something to keep in mind. Moving on to our next EX Pokemon, we have the Machamp EX, sitting at a bulky 180 HP. It has 2 very unique attacks. Its first attack, Thrash, allows us to hit for 20 damage times the number of damage counters on this Pokemon, and the Pokemon is then confused. So if the Machamp EX has 90 damage against it and it has 90 HP remaining, it can hit for a very massive 180 HP, so that is quite impressive. And it also has the Crazy Hammer attack, so it hits for 80 damage. However, if the Machamp EX also happens to be inflicted by some sort of special condition, we're able to hit for an additional 80 damage, and that will also allow us to shed all special conditions from this Pokemon. Now, it seems like there's a lot of synergy here with the Thrash attack and the Crazy Hammer attack. However, I think it's a bit risky if players are really going to be making use of the Thrash attack and then the Crazy Hammer attack. Reason being is that whenever a Pokemon is confused, I mean, there's always the possibility that we may flip a Tails and then inflict ourselves with a lot of damage. So personally, I would say it's not exactly the greatest combination of attacks to be used. I feel like the Machamp EX could, however, work quite well with the Ariados that we discussed a little bit earlier, because it's not a grass-type Pokemon, and we can just take advantage of that Ariados' special ability for our Crazy Hammer to hit for a massive 160 damage, latch on a Muscle Band, and there we go, that is an instant knockout. Sometimes we don't even need those Muscle Bands because there is always the fighting energies that we have going on, and of course the fighting stadiums, things like that. So Machamp EX, I feel like, is a Pokemon that we're really going to be seeing quite a bit more of, especially in fighting type decks. So I'm actually quite impressed, and I'm very happy that the Machamp EX is actually a feasible card, just because it's one of my favorite Pokemon. I've always really liked Machamp, and I'm just very happy that we're getting a very solid EX version of it. So moving on, guys, I think I'm going to cut the video in just a little bit. My voice is starting to get a little bit sore, so I'm going to discuss one last Pokemon, and, well, 2 last Pokemon, I guess, which are going to be a duo of the EX Pokemon, both the Tyranitar EX and the Mega Tyranitar EX. Unfortunately, Tyranitar EX, not exactly the best Pokemon. I mean, it has 2 attacks, both of which are relatively energetically expensive, and both of which are unfortunately not that great. So it has the Head Smash attack, hits for 60 damage, requires 3 energy cards. I would much rather be using a Pokemon such as Yveltal EX, so yeah, I'm sorry, Tyranitar EX, that is not a good attack by any means. Ground Break, unfortunately, again, not that great of an attack. Requires 2 Darkness energy cards and a double Colorless energy, or at the very least 4 different, a total of 4 energy cards. So that is very energetically expensive. It only hits for 130 damage, and it hits each of our own bench Pokemon by 10 damage. So Tyranitar EX is a pretty downright awful Pokemon for the most part. Luckily though, for us, the Mega Tyranitar EX absolutely redeems the Tyranitar EX, in that Mega Tyranitar EX hits for a very bulky 110 damage plus an additional 60 damage for each damage counter on the opponent's active Pokemon. So all we really need is a single damage counter on the opponent's active Pokemon, or two, and then we can pretty much knock out the bulk of EX and even Mega EX Pokemon that we will encounter. I mean, that Mega Tyranitar EX can potentially hit for 170 times 60 plus an additional 110 damage. I haven't done the math here, but suffice to say that it definitely adds up to a whole lot. So Mega Tyranitar EX, I think, is a very cool Pokemon. We're probably going to be seeing a lot of it being used in combination with the bat lines, just because, of course, the bats allow us to stack those damage counters onto the opponent's Pokemon, and then Mega Tyranitar EX can come in for the massive kills. Mega Tyranitar EX could potentially also be used with the, what's it called? Well, certain tool type attachments. Rocky Helmet, there we go, that's the tool card that I was looking for, especially given the fact that Mega Tyranitar EX can have up to 2 Pokemon tool cards attached to it. I feel like this is a very impressive Pokemon. We're definitely going to be seeing it in action, and yeah, so I'm actually quite happy about that. Again, I think it's a very cool Pokemon, and yeah, so that's going to be it for this video, guys. I'm going to cut it short. There's going to be a part 2 where I'm discussing the remainder of the Bandit Ring cards, so please be sure to check that out. And if you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Just take a look at the description section down below, and I'll provide you guys the link for the next video. So that is going to be it for now. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you guys shortly.